and I hope you enjoyed that last panel as much as I did. Yeah, I just wanted to, this is kind of for all of you, and then please, it'll be open to the audience, and please do ask questions and keep them as succinct as possible. So yeah, I just want to say you all have touched, and this has been themes from throughout the conference, all have touched on ancestry, storytelling, sense of self-respect and belonging, and love and hope, and how that can create that sense of community. But when people are losing or have lost their peers in terms of with our elders, or their safe spaces in terms of communities, in terms of gentrification, etc. How do we make sure that the generations are having these conversations together to like pass on knowledge between generations, pass on those family histories, ensure protection of tradition? So in terms of dance, in terms of music, in terms of creativity and expression. And that if there is any change that is deemed necessary for sort of economic development, so closing of those community spaces or closing down of programs that should be supporting our community, how do we make sure that our communities have a bit more sense of control of that process, and how do we engage basically to ensure our communities are tight still? If anybody would like to jump in.
I've got something of a response, but it may not answer the question. It may not answer the question. So the thing about passing on those ancestries, those histories, those geographies as well, and those stories, that's part of what music does, I think. And the contemporary Black British forms are a way of making those connections. When I was started doing my PhD in 2007, I'm from the Post-Windrush generation. My natural home is in sound systems and dancehall. So part of what I do, or part of what I think I do, is make those connections between those generations. I've got one foot in one camp and another foot in the other. And one of the turning points for me, so in the beginning I'm watching lots of YouTube videos, I'm really getting to grips with this sound that I'd heard everywhere, heard with all of these young people that were kind of in my life in some way, either in the office or on the bus. If you were anywhere in East London at that time, you couldn't help but hear grime. And so I'm hearing this as a kind of sonic backdrop, but not really paying too much attention to it, which I think is a feature of the generations. We see what and hear what younger people are doing, and we don't always pay attention in the way that we should. So I was hearing all of this, and I'm watching all of this music and listening to all of this music with intention rather than just as a backdrop. And I still can't remember which dancehall artist I was watching, and the penny dropped. The penny dropped about those sonic connections between the Clash, the crew, what happens on stage, the kind of getting the mic from the other person, and that's an intergenerational conversation. And I think what it offers us the opportunity to do is to talk about those things in that way. And so what I tried to do is to make those connections between, and I've written about the sonic genealogy from reggae to grime, and it offers a way of having those conversations with people that maybe are not in the same generation as us. It opens the door, I think. And the other thing that when you talked about as elders and as people pass away, well, what we hear through music and in other ways is that young people lose people as well, and they lose people often in ways that are quite dreadful. So that we need to have those conversations as well. If we're talking about well-being and love and care, we need to be able to talk about the difficulties and the challenges of our past. Because one of the things that when the book first came out, what so many young people said was, why didn't anybody tell me? Why didn't my parents say anything? But it's painful to say those things, and it's difficult to say those things. So nudge open the door with music or whichever way you can, and have those intergenerational conversations, I would say.
Brilliant, thank you. Actually, that kind of feeds into the question I was going to direct to you, Dr. Patten. Just so, yeah, how did you spoke about the sort of life cycle events of dance, and how does that kind of...
Yeah, because I think that's an important thing. The life cycle events, you know, from birth, you go to birthday celebrations, marriage, coming of age, and all of that, through to death. So those life cycle events are the important events that back in the day used to bring the whole family together. Things have changed. My mother was a dressmaker, and so she used to make the wedding dress, and the hours she used to spend sewing on the sequins and so forth. So for me growing up, I thought it was normal to go to 4, 5, 6 weddings a year. And it's only later on I found people didn't. but when you go to the weddings, back in those days, it was a whole family invited, not just the adults. And so therefore the children see the adults dancing, they get a chance to dance. Me, myself, I was big and bold and brash. So therefore, at the age of 8, when I see the man them lining up to dance with the bride, I step in line and say, I dance too. And so that's how we learn. One of the dances that we learned was the Chucky, for example. Chucky by Rupi Edwards. I don't know if you have that. Sorry. Right. I think maybe we can just try it. Good. I read that. But one thing about that, you see, that's the Chucky. But the Chucky also relates spiritually. It relates back to the dance for Shango, the bata, where they kutelu, 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 bam, bam. But then it also relates to young people nowadays, if you want to open the conversation. A couple years ago, there was a Christmas advert by John Lewis, I think it was, and he used the movement by Ding Dong called Fling. Yeah. Fling! My shoulder fear, fling! Booyaka, booyaka, booyaka! That's the same batter. It also has that same connection and lineage back to the Chucky. So if you want to start a conversation with the young people, an intergenerational conversation, you have to start to look at what were the dances that, if you're a young person, what were the dances that your parents and grandparents were doing, and as a parent or grandparent, what are the dances that the young people are doing that you can relate back to what you were doing to start that conversation and to show them that there's nothing new in this world. Everything is a rewind and come again.
Yeah, I think that's really much all for me, unless, did you want to add anything about the general malaise?
I think I really enjoy the work you're doing, and I think you've answered a lot of the questions that are raised that I've raised. You've got a lot of answers to a lot of the questions that I raised, looking in terms of culture and as well as joy, looking through music and the avenues where you can teach a background story, and that's a thread that can go through because it's the meanings and the understandings of what's going on through the dance and building in other understandings of spirituality or ways of being or cultural practices that can come through looking at movement, dance, building on that to add wider knowledge and keep that story through the generations, passing it on. So that's, we've got complex elders, we can't rely on particular individual elders to be doing the work on their own. I think it's something that takes building culture, cultural building as well, consciously building cultural processes.
Sorry, and I was just, if I can just add one other thing. You know, food is an important part of our culture. And so therefore, food is another way in which the generations can interact. And also, it's a way through which, when you start to talk about food, and if you invite somebody to come and participate and you eat together and then you bring up conversations. That's how, even if you don't have grandparents here, you can adopt a grandparent or adopt many grandparents. It doesn't have to be one, and you get a whole history just through the sharing of the food, or the preparation of the food, or even when you start to think about, okay, what food would you like to eat? And when young people start to say, you ask, what food you eat when you go to a dance session? And they start to talk about jerk chicken, etc. And I say, well, you know, back in the day it was curry goat and rice, and curry goat and rice still serve. And those are the ways in which we bring around an intergenerational discussion. But also, it means that we have to be creative and think outside the box when we're having certain celebrations, like wedding celebrations, so that we don't say adults only and exclude the children.
That's happening a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just also just thinking as you're speaking about passing things on. Earlier this year, I said to one of my mates, I said, you know, I've got to teach you to sew on. I've got my mother's sewing machine. It's a converted old pedal-controlled singer, cabinet and everything. And I've kept it, and it's in good condition. I use it. It's the only machine I've actually had. I've never had or used one in my home, or my mum's home, our family home, and in my home. And I'm like coming off renewed. And so I'm thinking, I don't want somebody to look at this and throw it out in the corner. So I said to my niece, I've got to teach you guys to use this machine. I was taught on it by my mum. I've got to teach one of you. You know, so it's like passing that on, and then this one is, one of you got to adopt it in your house because it's an heirloom.
Right.
You know, well, not necessarily, you know, but it's like, we'll take a picture or something, but it's carrying the stories through, passing on those skills and those experiences, a way of living, you know, to the next generation. And we can do those things subtly through, as you say, food and the sewing machine, and then knitting. And I said, do you want to knit in? I said, yeah, I'm surprised that I get takers on my little quirky ideas.
Right.
Oh, that's really valuable. Thank you so much. I think we've got 15 minutes left, so I'll open it up to the floor. So if anybody's got any questions. Oh, okay, I don't know. The gentleman at the back came first, sorry. So if we can keep some, we have a few.
Hopefully this is not an aside, but we're talking a lot about intergenerational, but I think we also have to talk about interracial, because with each generation it seems that the fastest growing population now is mixed race children. So how does that impact on the work that you're doing and you project, plan to do in the future? How do we tell our stories when there's more of a white mix in it, if you like?
It's always... Caribbean culture is complex. What you just said is complex. It's just complex. We just talk about what it is in reality, and we also just put those components into their context and share them, because it is shared. For sure, it is shared. So it's not. We're not going to ignore it. But if we're talking here about the Caribbean element part of it, to not dissipate and disappear, or become so confused and so diluted that we don't know what it is. So it's to keep that, is to understand that element in the mix. So there'll be mixed, and there'll be some families that are not so mixed, you know. So, sorry, go ahead.
I suppose because my research area is on Grimes, which is a contemporary Black British musical form, but it's a kind of convivial activity. So when you look and when you listen to what's being made and what's being produced, it's a Black creative expression, but many people make it, and so you'll hear the Cockney rhyming slang in the early, especially in the early, where's Les, iterations. You'll hear the Cockney rhyming slang, you'll hear Bengali words, you'll have the kind of the beats that are influenced by reggae, dancehall, jungle, UK garage, and hip hop as well. So those convivial aspects are there anyway, and then as time evolves, what you see is that how because the Black is not a monolith. It contains multitudes, and I think that is demonstrated through the music and over time. And it's complex and it's difficult to speak in terms of this is what it is and this is how it should be, without taking into account those multitudes and the way that those different communities express themselves under that heading of Black and British.
I think old time people used to say, you're true, you're calm, you're not calm or foul. So what we mean, when you throw the corn hasn't got any name written on it. It's out there, and those who have the need and the wisdom to see that there's something to eat there, they will come and eat and take it. And so it's in the same way that I talk to my children, and I share the stories them, and I share the dances, that I share the ring games and things with them. I teach in schools, I teach in university settings, I teach in informal settings. But invariably within those settings, those who come to it are mixed, and so you're not going to stop one from coming in. Everybody comes in, and you share everything. But what we have to remember is that what's the best way to put it now? Is a little bit like, you know, I'm trying to think of something that has layers. Okay, you know, back in the day, they have dresses that had the dress on top, and then yes, is it the crinoline and them things there underneath it. So each layer you can take away, or you can add in. And so when you think about it, when we speak about the culture, for those who are deeply rooted in the culture, they get right down under the crinoline and everything, and right down to the petticoat. And then, but those who don't know about it, they will just admire, and they'll take the aesthetic value of what the dress looks like on top. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to share the culture so that those who are interested will come, and those who need to find out more and go deeper, they will come and they will lead the discussion to take it deeper and get more out of you. I think, it's a bit like, the better example would have been drumming, where you have 2-3 drummers. Those who are listening from outside, it sounds like whole heap of musicians playing. And then when you go in, you see it's only 3 or 4. But each one knows the role that they have to play in order to combine it with the other one to make it sound like more than the sum of the parts. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Opposite Samantha? Yeah.
Oh yeah, so my question's for Dr. Patten. There was a bit in your presentation about African and Neo-African cosmology that I just wanted to ask. You didn't get to that bit yet.
Okay, right. Well, the African and the Neo-African. Okay, I talk about African and Neo-African. Neo-African meaning New African, because within the British setting in particular, the word traditional became almost like a dirty word. Within dance, when you went to the funders, for example, the Arts Council, they will tell you that they don't fund traditional dance, etc. And so, therefore, the traditional was seen as a dirty word because it seemed to represent something that's a museum piece and that's stagnated and should die a natural death. Whereas when you talk about Neo-African, the New African is there because the dance, the African dances themselves, the practices as they were practiced traditionally, they are still there. And they reappear, particularly within dancehall. You see it. You'll see, if you look down the river, pon the river, pon the bank, down the flank, all of these, you can see the steps from John Kunu dance inside it. John Kunu is then connected back to Africa, the Egungun from Nigeria, the Guluwankulu from Central Africa. All of these masquerade traditions, they're all there within the popular forms now. So I can speak about the African and / Neo-African, because even in Jamaica now, when you go, we have Kumina. But the Kumina people, they will tell you they are African, and the dance they do is African dance, because it came from is the Congo region that it came from originally. And so they don't stop calling themselves Africans because they were taken from Africa and placed in the Caribbean. They are Africans still, and they still speak their African language, the Kikonga language. And so therefore, in terms of the cosmology, when I talk about the cosmology, we don't have time to go into the real depths of it, but just to let you know, it's the African and Neo-African world view that I'm talking about, how they see themselves and how they structure the world, which is related to the spiritual cosmology, where you have the supreme being, God at the top, and then you have the different layers of spirits. And because I don't have time to explain it properly, I won't name all of them. Those who want to find out more, come and see me, and I can explain the different levels of the spirits. That includes the ancestral spirits, which were the spirits that once lived on earth and have transitioned to the spirit world. And so therefore, through the dance, we connect to all of that. And that is what's going on. So it hints at it when we're all dancing together, when we all were doing the boga movement, then you felt another energy. That's partly because of what Victor Turner calls communitas, that deep level feeling of camaraderie that we get when we're all moving together. But then it goes further than communitas, because then there's elements of the Mayal spirit that start to come in. And I could go on, but time will go.
Oh, thank you so much. I think at the risk of not eating too much into the keynote, is there time to take one more question? Yep.
Yeah, my question is to Joy. In some of the research I've done, it's been to do with drill music. And I know recently, like, the police have tried to use anti-terrorist laws against drill music. And a lot of the artists, when they upload their videos on YouTube, they have to go through the police, and they have to get police approval to then be able to play this music. So I was just wondering if you know of how to resist this censorship for artists.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because there's definitely a kind of continuity of practice in how black musics are surveilled and controlled, and how black populations that listen to black musics are surveilled and controlled. And the position that UK drill finds itself in is the position that grime found itself in a decade ago, when they had Form 696, which was a health and safety form, but you had to declare the ethnicity of the people that were going to perform, and if you didn't fill in the form, then it was likely that your event would get shut down. You had grime MCs that couldn't go to particular places and play, or if you played grime music at a particular event, then the event would get shut down. So there is a continuity of practice that goes on. You can see it in how reggae was policed as well. And somewhere buried in my archive, I've got a copy of an email from the Commissioner of Police in Liverpool saying that Lethal B, who's a grime MC, he wants to perform. He was doing university tours, because one of the things that happened when grime couldn't happen in club spaces anymore, they went on kind of university tours as well. And there's this kind of long exchange between the Commissioner and the event promoter about, do we want this guy here? He's going to play that, and it's trouble. Who is this Lethal B? And so on, and yet look, 20 years later, it's the soundtrack to an estate agent's advert. So the world moves on, and so the position that UK drill finds itself in is that it's come of age in the age of the internet. So a lot of UK drill is online, it's experienced online, it's also under scrutiny online as well. And the consequences for some young artists is that their work is policed. So I think it was Digger D had to present his lyrics to the Metropolitan Police before he could perform them. So this 19, 20-year-old couldn't, Skendo and AM had an order that they couldn't perform a particular song, and they did, and they got a suspended sentence. And so the resistance is about, well, if you listen to some of the language that the drill artists, it changes, the slang changes really quickly, doesn't it? So someone has to keep up and try and interpret all of that. And there are networks and communities of scholars, legal advisors as well, who are researching this and who are pushing back against the Metropolitan Police when they present themselves in court as experts, saying, well, this shows intent. And I'll send you the name of the network, but there are many people that have said, no, this can't run. You can't use someone's lyrics to show intent of a really, really serious crime, and the majority of the time that it happens, and the young people that get caught up, there are many drill artists, but the percentage of people that get caught up in that criminal justice setting are young black men.
Yeah.
And you don't even have to be there. You just have to know the person. You just have to be in their video. And when you've got a musical form that relies on groups of people, and it's part of the aesthetic, Clavon, or whatever it is to wear, but wearing the same clothes as somebody else can constitute a gang or gang activity. So we have to be really, really careful. And it's very easy as well, isn't it, to go into that kind of that narrative that says, oh, well, you know, this music, it kind of promotes violence, and people get very scared. But so what I would suggest is look beyond that, look and think about what narrative, what discourse is playing out here. Where is, you know, who's making these decisions? You know. So yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna stop there. I'll go on a rant, and I'm going to stop.
That was perfect. Thank you so much. And yeah, just. We're going to have to wrap up now so that we can move on to the keynote speakers. But yeah, just to show some appreciation for Dr H Patten.